caused massive destruction to the building where I live. The other building was totally brought to the ground. It's almost 9 stories building, and it has been brought to the ground totally. And the building where I live, which is 8-story building, has been massively destructed as well.
You say that that building is in a. I mean, everywhere in Gaza is highly populated, Yumna, I know, but what sort of area is that surrounding that building that holds those? You said there were media offices in that building. Are there shops there? Is it a residential area?
In a Shuruq building, in all the 14 stories, in every single floor, there are like not less than 3 or 4 offices, media offices of channels of and media companies. So this is the first thing. The bottom story is filled with shops and restaurants. So this has also been there are also banks. There is a bank that is just next to the building. Capital Mall, which is the only mall in the Gaza Strip, is opposite to this building, right opposite to it. A great range of shops, clothes shops, and the best shops in Gaza actually are opposite to this building and next to it. We have a couple of buildings, like the one you can see through the camera, if the camera is showing it, the white one which is next to it. Okay, this one is a totally residential building, which means that it is going to be totally destructed as well. Where I am now, where I'm giving this live right now, is a couple of meters away from Shuruq, and you can see how massive the destruction is showing from here.
And Yumna, I tried to ask you a little earlier, but are you hearing?
Another missile just hit.
Yumna, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Are you hearing the sound of jets in the skies above you, or drones, or is this artillery that's being fired? Do you know?
Yes, the drones are. Yes, we can definitely hear the drones above us, and the sound. I don't think that they're jets, but just the rockets that launch right by the air raids. But the drones are very clear. The sound of the drones are very clear.
That's a pretty regular sound, though, isn't it? You must get pretty used to hearing the sound of drones overhead in Gaza.
We hear that the drones 24/7, as they say, 24/24. Like the drones, the Israeli drones are in the skies of Gaza every single moment, at all times,
okay,
monitoring everything and.
Before we let you go, Yumna, perhaps you just talk us through.
This gives a sense.
Yeah.
This gives a very, very strange, or a very big and important sense of alarm that we could actually be targeted at any time by any of these drones.
Okay, and Yumna, talk us through what had happened in Gaza in the hours preceding the explosion that we've seen in the last 10 minutes or so.
Al-Qassam brigades announced this afternoon on Wednesday the martyrdom of their commander of the Gaza brigade, Bassam Isa. And they said in their statement that he has been martyred along with leaders of his brothers and mujahideen in the occupation's aggression on their sites, on the resistance sites in Gaza. This calls for a massive retaliation on this assassination, as the resistance has called it. Also, the occupation warplanes, also a couple of about an hour ago, bombed and targeted Abu Khadra complex. It's a governmental complex near here Al Wafa Hospital for medical rehabilitation, also causing the hospital to be damaged. And this was and threatening it. It threatened a Shuruq tower to be bombed, and this is what we have just seen. So this is what has happened in these late hours until now.
All right, Yumna, before we let you go, we're just going to play the video again of what happened just a few moments ago, 10 minutes ago, as we were talking. At least half of the building collapsed after that strike. Yumna, tell us once again, before we let you go for now, just tell us what this building was and why it might have been targeted.
Well, targeting such a building which only holds media and media offices is a clear message by the Israeli occupation that it does not want any media offices. It does not want any media to actually bring out the truth of what is going on in the Gaza Strip. The crazy air raids that are taking place in every moment, the killing and targeting of civilians, of residential towers, apartments, hundreds of Palestinians have been wounded in just 2 days of escalation. Thousands, if they have been saying that hundreds of rockets have been launched from the Gaza Strip. Thousands of air raids have been carried on the Gaza Strip. They're using their massive power to bring down the civilians of the Gaza Strip as a way to actually pressure the Palestinian factions. These residential buildings that are being brought down, like a Shuruq building, Hanadi Tower, Al Jawhara Tower, a Susi Tower, these buildings are not buildings where resistance factions reside or have been launching rockets or any of that. These are just pure residential buildings that have been directly targeted by the occupation forces, and this is what is driving them to actually target a building or a tower like a Shuruq tower, which is the only way to actually bring out the reality.
All right, Yumna, for the moment, we'll let you go. Yumna Al-Sayed, journalist in Gaza there. Let's go to Al Jazeera's Harry Fawcett, who is in southern Israel. Harry, I don't know where you are. You'll have been able to see the pictures. You certainly heard what was going on there. Why would Israel target a building that according to Yumna, is largely occupied by media organizations?
Well, I think there are several possible motivations. The Israeli military and the Israeli government has been saying that these buildings that it has been bringing down have been, in part at least, used by Hamas or other armed factions inside the Gaza Strip. Now, of course, there is a huge impact to doing that. We're talking about hundreds of people potentially losing their homes. And as well as that, often these are in relatively well-to-do areas in Gaza. It's the possibility that some of those families may well themselves be relatively senior families within the Gaza society. And so it has that impact as well. And of course, it is a huge statement of power to its enemies inside Gaza, that it has the ability to do these extremely large-scale destructions of what have been landmarks in Gaza. So I think there are several potential motivations, but the effect on the hundreds of people who live in there, warned as they have been to get out, so their lives, to some extent, being the risk to their lives being minimized. However, without a home inside Gaza, which is under a huge barrage of Israeli airstrikes at the moment, is not a good place to be, and this is having a massive impact.
Harry, Hamas says that several of its senior commanders have been killed, including its military chief. What's the significance of that?
Again, another major step taken by Israel, another expression of both its intelligence and its ability to strike. It says, the Israeli military, that these were 6 senior commanders who were part of the general staff of Hamas, close to the head of the military wing, Mohammed Deif. It has been confirmed by Hamas that they have been killed, including the head of the Gaza City brigade. So a major blow, which is almost certain to elicit a major response in this kind of chain of escalation that we've been seeing in the recent couple of days. There are indications and certainly expectations, at least on the Israeli side, that another big barrage is on its way. We should also talk about what's happening inside the Israeli government. At the moment, there is a security cabinet meeting that has just got underway. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already been talking about that attack, killing those 6 commanders, saying that it was an unimaginable thing for the terrorists, as he called them, to have happened to them, and that more would be coming. Well, discussions on exactly what that means are now underway. There are some reports within the Israeli media that there are at least considerations about a potential expansion to some kind of a ground offensive as well. Now, I have to put a big health warning on that it is not yet in any way confirmed or being talked about publicly, but that is what there are reports of in the Israeli media, that if a decision has not yet been made, at least it is being considered. And we have seen a good deal of military hardware, tracked vehicles, heavy artillery, long-range artillery and tanks being brought into the area close to where we are here.
In the meantime, is anything being done to try to mediate between the two sides at the moment, to bring this violence to an end?
Well, there have been expressions of concern and calls for calm from many governments and many organizations around the world. So far, that has done little to ameliorate things. The key mediator in terms of face-to-face ability to talk in all of these recent escalations, have to say much more minor than what we're looking at the moment, has been Egypt. And so far, there doesn't seem to have been any success from the Egyptian side. Indeed, the Israeli military and the Israeli government seem pretty implacable. That a red line was crossed on Monday when Jerusalem was brought under long-range rocket fire from Hamas. That is what began the chain, the most immediate proximate cause anyway to the chain of events that we're now watching unspool. And then again, there was that huge coordinated barrage targeting Tel Aviv last night. Again, these seem to be things that the government of Israel is determined to respond to in an extremely overwhelming fashion. And the Defense Minister, Benny Gantz, earlier today said that there was no end date that was being put on this, and there seems to be no public expression of will to slow things down. In fact, exactly the opposite. Benjamin Netanyahu talking about an ever-increasing round of attacks.
And Harry, while we've got you here, I just want to ask you once again about something we were discussing earlier, about unrest within Israel itself.
Yes, this is another extremely disturbing, worrying, frightening development within the country for people in both communities, the Jewish and Palestinian Israeli or Arab communities. Israel, its population is about 20% Palestinian Israeli. And what we've seen since the real explosion of violence on Monday has been an eruption of communal, racial violence between elements of these two groups. What was seen on Monday was that there was a killing of a Palestinian Israeli man. He was shot dead by a Jewish man in Lod. There was an enormous funeral after that the following day in that city, which led to clashes with. There have then been riots taking place both there and further north in other mixed Jewish Arab cities. The president of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, who is a right-wing Likud politician, but someone who has been very open to trying to improve ties with the Israeli Arab community, opposed the nation-state law, which, in the view of many Palestinian Israelis, demoted them in terms of the national character of the country and denied them important rights. He is someone who has, as I say, tried to reach out. He is now talking about bloodthirsty Arab mobs conducting pogroms against Jews. So that is the level of the discourse that we're currently seeing. The Prime Minister of Israel as well is talking about using an iron fist to crack down. Lod itself is being subject to a curfew from 8 p.m., which is in just over an hour's time from now. And as well as that, I've just seen reports, at least, of a senior politician, local politician in Lod, talking about armed Jewish settlers potentially heading in the direction. So there are all sorts of rumors, all sorts of extremely disturbing developments in terms of that intercommunal violence that we've been seeing, as well as the violence on a much larger industrial scale that we've been witnessing and viewing both in Gaza behind us and in terms of the rocket fire that's been flying around Israel. Harry,
stay with us for a moment. I just want to run those pictures again from around 20 minutes ago when Israeli airstrikes brought down a big Gaza City high-rise building. Now, that was a building that we're told housed shops and media offices. Harry, you were telling us earlier on about why Israel might see that building as a target. What about the response now from Hamas? How will Hamas respond to that, do you think? Are we in for another night of rocket fire from Gaza into Israel?
I think almost undoubtedly. I mean, there is absolutely no sign of any stepping back in terms of the pace of attacks from Israel, and I think that will elicit or have to, both sides feeling obliged, I think, at this point, to continue in this extremely depressing calculus that they are making in terms of what is required to respond to the last round of violence. So yes, we have heard that bomb shelters in Eilat on the Red Sea in the far south of Israel, that they have been opened. We have seen reports that fighting factions inside Gaza are promising further attacks and a deterioration of the situation in the coming hours. So it's obviously impossible to give any really accurate indications or predictions of where this will go, but it's not looking like it's going anywhere good at all at the moment.
Harry Fawcett there, live in southern Israel. For the moment, many thanks indeed, Harry. Gaza, the target of Israel's largest bombing campaign since the 2014 war. Israel has been launching airstrikes right throughout last night and into today. Within the last half hour, Israel has struck a large tower block in Gaza. We were on air live with our reporter in Gaza when the building was, it's been partially brought down. I mean, what's still standing there will be incredibly unsafe, and that will have to be destroyed at some point. This was the moment. And you saw the remaining structure there wobble on its foundation. So, I mean, the building totally destroyed, obviously, and the part that we could still see there in that pall of smoke will obviously have to come down. That was a building that housed media offices. Our correspondent was telling us. This is the live shot now of the remains of that building. Some shops in the basement. There were also some people who had flats, apartments in that building as well. It is just coming up to 7 o'clock in Gaza. More than 2 million people are living under the shadow of the most serious escalation of violence there since the 2014 war. In the past half hour, an Israeli airstrike destroyed that building where many media companies have their offices in Gaza. They've been targeting Gaza's police headquarters and government buildings with air power, reducing them to rubble. Senior Hamas leaders are reported to have been killed, including the top commander in Gaza City. At least 56 Palestinians have been killed, including 15 children. And from Gaza, the armed wing of the Palestinian group Hamas and its allied factions have launched more than 1,000 rockets towards Israel. Towns and cities deep in Israeli territory have been hit, some managing to get through the Iron Dome missile defense system. And there you go. I was talking about how unsafe that remaining portion of the building is. It has now collapsed. We're not sure whether that was another missile attack that brought the building down completely, but it has now gone. It was a missile, I'm being told. At least 2 missiles hit the building, the remaining part of the building that was left standing after that first missile strike some 25 minutes or so ago. All right, I was telling you about missiles being fired from Gaza into Israel. They've reached as far as Ashkelon, Ashdod, Tel Aviv, and other areas in southern and central Israel. 5 civilians and a soldier have been killed there. Let's bring in Al Jazeera's Harry Fawcett, who's live for us in southern Israel. Harry, we're just looking at another missile strike. At least 2 missiles hit the remaining part of that building that we saw coming down here earlier. This is the moment when the building was finally brought down. Harry, that was a building that housed media offices and ground floor level shops.
Yes, I mean, as far as the Israelis are concerned, what they're saying in bringing down these towers is that they are also being used in part, whether it be some apartments within them or something else. They're being used in part by fighting factions within Gaza, and that makes them legitimate targets, especially given the fact that they have been ringing up building managers to clear those buildings of civilians before they take them down. It is also a huge statement of power and a very visual statement of destruction in Gaza and visible to the residents of Gaza and also Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and others. What it also does, of course, is renders hundreds and hundreds of people homeless in the middle of a military escalation. So there is a huge consequence to civilian life that is going to be felt by these big destructive acts. At the same time, Israel is saying that it did kill earlier on Wednesday 6 senior command members of the Hamas General Staff. It says that they were, among them, the head of the Gaza City Brigade and 5 others who were involved in things such as intelligence and rocket production. 10 others who worked in those areas also killed in those attacks. And that is something that has been confirmed by Hamas, is almost certain to elicit a major response from Hamas in terms of more rocket fire. That's what the expectation is in any event. Nonetheless, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said it was making good on what he'd warned of the day before, and he said that there will be more to come.
I said yesterday that these sons of darkness, the terrorists of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they bear responsibility. A short while ago, we eliminated senior commanders in the Hamas General Command, including the commander of Gaza Brigade and other commanders. This is just the beginning. We will strike them with hits they did not dream of.
Harry, while all of this going on, there's a parallel crisis unfolding in Israel's mixed Palestinian-Israeli towns and neighborhoods.
Yes, that's right. This is an issue which is also very much occupying the Israeli government. It's a crisis of a related but different kind, one within the country itself and the communities themselves, the Jewish and Arab communities who live here. 20% of the Israeli population is Palestinian Israeli. And what we've seen is after a shooting dead of a Palestinian Israeli man in Lod on Monday night, a massive funeral which led to clashes with the Israeli security forces, and then an eruption really of violence in many mixed Jewish Arab towns, particularly focused on Lod, where we saw Jews attacked with stones, a synagogue set on fire, also Arabs being attacked as well in various places. And so this is a real crisis for the government. They have instituted a civil emergency in Lod. They've put a curfew in place due to come into force at 8 p.m. tonight, so less than an hour away. And 3 other cities as well. The border force, usually used in the occupied West Bank, they have been deployed to try to restore order. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledging to use an iron fist to do so.
And Harry, let's talk about the situation in Israel itself with that barrage of rockets. Over 1,000 rockets now having been fired from Gaza into southern Israel. A number of people have been killed there. What's the mood in the country itself? And is there anyone at the moment who is mediating between the two sides to perhaps bring an end to this?
Well, to start with that point, there were efforts, we understand, from the Egyptians who have acted as mediators in the past during these, well, it's difficult to say these sorts of escalations because this is an extremely unusual, rare and enormous one. But yes, there were efforts by the Egyptians to try to mediate, but there seemed to be very little will to step back from the brink, and those efforts, in the short term at least, have failed. As for the impact of what's been coming out from Gaza, as you say, more than 1,000 rockets, an enormous amount of weaponry coming out of Gaza, targeting Israeli cities. Most notably, there was that double barrage in the middle of the night and earlier in the evening on Tel Aviv.